I'm going a little further back into the integration, but just first let me tell you who I am. My name is, again, Raina Gittens. I am a PhD student at Georgia State University, and I currently am in the communications department, specifically studying rhetoric and politics. Rhetoric, what is rhetoric? So rhetoric is actually the study of language or symbols. So any way that we use language to communicate or symbols to communicate, either to persuade people or to create identity or identification through language, is how I define rhetoric in my personal research. The reason why I decided that rhetoric and communication was the study that would be most important to the world and my community is because I believe that words create our reality. And I also get that from the Bible, that God and His Word are one, that the Lord spoke and it was made. So that's why I believe words are so important. So in all of my studies, I'm looking at words or symbols in general, and how we communicate language to create reality. So this particular study, again, has to do with the civil rights movement, and I think the projector is there. There we go. So it has to do with the civil rights movement, specifically the clergy's actions within the civil rights movement. Much of the historical narrative about the 1950s and the beginnings of the civil rights movement tell us these historical narratives about kind of a moral northern populace defeating or overcoming the South's racial problems. And again, I put the emphasis on the moral populace. And much of the historical side of the study talks about how religion, and obviously Martin Luther King and Andrew Young, how these people obviously are religious figures, had such a large effect on the civil rights movement. But what is often missing is, well, what did they do? So, and why is that so important today? Well, today, when Obama was president, we were living in a time where the majority opinion was, oh, we're post-race. We're post-racism, rather. But obviously, for the people in this room, we knew we weren't post-racism. But to the rest of the world, oh, we're post-racism. We have a black president. And really, it was that language had changed about black people. So in the civil rights movement, it was overt racism. And now it's the respectability racism. And because language and the way people were talking about black people changed, they assume, oh, well, I don't talk bad about them anymore. So the assumption is that people had some type of moral change. But we know now that Trump's here, and what reveals to the rest of the world, what we already knew, is that racism isn't gone, that there was no huge heart change in people, that there was a policy change and people changed the way they spoke about black people and other nationalities, but their hearts didn't actually change. But the problem with that is that when you talk about the civil rights movement and you say, well, religion had a large effect, well, if religion had a large effect, then you're really talking about morality. But if we're saying that there was no moral change, then what was the effect that religion actually had in the civil rights movement? And you can't explicate that just by saying, oh, well, a lot of the civil rights leaders were Christian or Muslim or Jews. You actually have to go look at what they said. And what historians, and why rhetoric and history kind of go hand in hand, is historians just look at who was involved a lot of times, whereas rhetoricians explicate, well, what did they say, or what were the symbols and the persuasive choices they made that actually made a difference in that context. So for me, I actually did my research on looking at all of these sermons, a lot of reading, which was really fascinating, actually. And I didn't know what I was going to find at all. I didn't have any outside thoughts on what would happen. But I read the sermons, as well as I put myself in the context of the early 1950s and what people were thinking at that time. So I was reading books just in general about the 1950s. So I could set my mind in that context because, again, persuasion works for that time period. So what was persuasive to them at that time might not be persuasive to me now. So it's important to me to know what the context was in that time period. So what a closer textual critique of these sermons actually revealed is that in the 1950s, they actually, a lot of these sermons were about the fact that racial discrimination was the sin in America. God's hand of grace would be removed from the U.S. because of this sin, and the proof of this removal would be a communist attack from Russia. And how they actually were persuasive in this rhetoric is, first they had to present Southern segregationists as foreigners and perpetuate the communist attack fears in order to get the American government to act and to take executive action. So when you think of Little Rock, integration of the Little Rock school in Little Rock 9, and how the president finally at the last hour calls in the troops to allow them to get into the school. What caused that executive action to happen was not because the president had a change of heart, it's because of this fear of communism and the fear abroad of America not being this equal nation that they so say they are. So how do we grasp this? So first I want to take you through kind of my thought process in this, again, was getting into the context of that time period. And the first part of that context that was important to me was this God's country ideology and where it comes from. And so I start here with Abraham Lincoln. In one of his speeches, this is actually when he was in the New Jersey Senate, Abraham Lincoln referred to the United States as God's almost chosen people. And to say that somebody's almost chosen means that they're not completely chosen. Again, this is 1860s. We're not God's country yet, we're almost chosen. And at this point in time, Lincoln is referring specifically to the blemish on slavery at that time, that this is the sin of America. We're the almost chosen people, but we have this sin because we say we're this place of liberty, but we're really not. And then again, he also says in his in the Emancipation Proclamation, after signing that, he addresses Congress, noting, "In giving freedom to the slave, we assume freedom to the free, honorable alike in what we give and what we preserve. States is the last best hope of earth. We are the new Israel. We are God's chosen country, and if we don't become equal and get rid of all these problems we have, then we can't be this chosen people of God." And then now we move to the 1950s, we're a post-World War II America, and we have won. And so now we are officially God's chosen country. We won the war. They believe that the nuclear bomb was, God gave it to us, and we win. And they're living this loudest victory after two wars, World War I, World War II, but they're also and even to explicate even more that this was God's country in 1950s is when "In God We Trust" was added to the monetary bills, just proving more and more that this is the new Israel. And then in this time, you're living in this post-World War, but these are people that were in World War I, in World War II, and they were very afraid that there could be a third war at any time, especially now you have nuclear weaponry. So it's like, oh, we could totally annihilate and ruin the entire earth with this nuclear weaponry. And now the big fear is communist Russia, that they will attack us with nuclear weaponry, and on top of that, they will attack us with all of the other colored nations of the world. So Asia and the Middle East, if they can get them on their side and make them communist countries, they would attack the United States. And so this fear is growing. And the foreign policy at this time in the United States was also changing. Prior to the 1950s, America was very much a closed country where it was like, we take care of ourselves, kind of how Trump's trying to do now. We're a closed country, we just worry about ourselves. After World War II, that's when we decided, and Ibram Kendi even explicates it in his, Dr. Ibram Kendi actually explicated in his book, Stamped from the Beginning. Shout out to him, great book. But he actually explicates that at this point in time, that's when America opens up and says, we're supposed to save the rest of the world. We're supposed to save the rest of the world from communist Russia. And this is when they actually decide that we'll put troops in other countries if Russia's trying to make it communist. We'll give them money to fight Russia if we need to. And so this is when that period starts to happen. Before the 1950s, America didn't give money to other countries. And America did not put troops on the ground in other countries to fight their wars that weren't even American wars. So this is a point where America is making themselves a world leader. So I just wanted to let you guys all know that. So, mind you, all this stuff is happening, and the clergy is not numb to this stuff. The clergy knows what's going on. And they are using that. Why they used it, why they chose it, if it was just serendipity, I don't know what was in their minds at the time. But I will tell you, reading these sermons I was just like, man, these guys are smart. Or God was smart in helping them craft these sermons, whatever it may be. But what you find in their sermons is this reference continuously to the Old Testament, and Israel, obviously, we know, was attacked by Babylon, and so now it's this Russia's Babylon, and the U.S. is Israel. And if we are sinners, then Babylon's going to attack us, which is communism, and that's a sign that God's grace has left us. And what a lot of these clergy, not all of them obviously, but the ones that believed in civil rights, the sin that they perpetuated in this, was the sin that would cause communism to win if there was a World War III, is the sin of segregation at this point in time. So that's my particular thesis on this. And so I want to go through and give you some of the actual quotes in these sermons. Again, these sermons are just like, it's like listening or to any sermon that you hear if you go to church, and I also did, this isn't just white sermons, these are black sermons as well, and they're not all preachers, these are just people who are in the Judeo-Christian corpus and are speaking, and they are making references to God and to communism. And so some of the things that I wanted to just tell you or show you, a few quotes, is in Martin Luther King. We'll start there. And this is in one of his earlier speeches in 1957. He's an amazing speaker, guys. So anyway, he first presents America as God's country in this speech. So he describes his technological and scientific advances that will astound and stagger the imagination. And then after he chumps up America, then he says there's another side of our nation that is not so bright. In the midst of all of our scientific and technological advances, we still suffer the plague of racial conflict. And the word plague stood out to me. To use the term plague is to say we're infected. We have a foreign invader. He's presenting the South as this foreign invader in the United States. And you have to present them as a foreigner, because the only way executive action would be taken against its own body is that they consider these people foreigners. So you are seeing clergy starting to refer to terms to make the South look like foreign bodies in their own nation. You have like Marion A. Wright. He'll refer to the Southern segregationists as they pretend, they appear, they evade, they misrepresent, chicanery, cunning. So these are all trying to present them as evil conspirators against the rest of America. Like, they're not just kind of like accidentally doing bad things, like they're planning to do bad things, and they're making us look bad abroad as well. Even Emmett Till's mother, Mamie Till, and I use her because she was speaking in a church at the time, and she explicates specifically. She says Mississippi is the cotton curtain, which explicates like the Iron Curtain. She's like, they are the Iron Curtain, like Russia. And she even says, foreign powers won't have to come over here to destroy us. We'll just stand here and disintegrate because of Mississippi. So again, just saying, hey, the South is going to ruin America. I'm going to skip a lot of things, but I definitely wanted to get to Dr. Mordecai Johnson. So he kind of reels it in, like he goes all in. He has, after Brown versus Board of Education, he says a speech in regards to that, and he goes, if that Supreme Court had decided that segregation in schoolhouses was just a righteous thing to do under the law and the Constitution of the United States, China and Africa's hearts would have sunk. The leadership of this world would have been wrapped up in Christmas paper with a red ribbon and turned over to the communist leadership of this world. So he's saying specifically, Brown versus Board of Education didn't happen because y'all's hearts changed and you thought it was the righteous thing to do. It was because you're afraid that China and Africa is going to go onto the communist side and come over to us and attack us. So he says it specifically. Marion A. Boggs, he presents this world of with lots of statistics in his speeches to show this world where it's just Russia and it's just the United States. he places this map. So he says things, I'll read my favorite quote from him was, 3/4 of all human beings are black and brown and yellow. In this multicolored world, the United States is the most powerful nation that ever existed. The second most powerful nation in that world is Soviet Russia. An additional 800 million people have not yet made up their minds which of these sides they are going to be on. All but about 10% of that second 800 million are colored. But they're not going to run from communism into the control of a new nation that segregates and humiliates them and robs them of equal opportunity to earn a living. So there's a visual power to his statistics, to Dr. Johnson's statistics. It splits the world into two countries. It's the United States and it's Russia. And it's white people versus the colored people of America, or the colored people of the world. And he creates this visual fear that America becomes small compared to all these colored nations in the world. And if we don't get it together with the colored people here, then the rest of the world is going to attack. And this is a sign of God's hand of grace coming off of America. So what's the importance of all this study? I would love to go through every quote because they were very fascinating to me. But the reason why this is so important is because we're living in a time, Black Lives Matter or whatever movement comes next, where it's a time for the clergy voice to be heard in a way. And a lot of times we have to look at how was the clergy successful? Again, it's important. We say that they were involved in the civil rights movement. How were they involved? And so to just say that they changed hearts and made everybody love each other, yes, they preached about that, obviously. But that wasn't the only thing that caused them to be successful. So pastors go out today and they're just preaching love and unity and let's integrate our churches and kumbaya. Yeah, that's lovely. That's Jesus. I believe in that completely. However, in reality, we're going to make political change and economic change. You're going to have to go a little further because America isn't changing things because their heart changes. They're changing things because because of their world stage, because of money, because of capitalism, whatever it be. So you've got to play with the big dogs and play the same game that they're playing. And the clergy has to sit in that space as well. Obviously, not going against their religious duties, of course. I would never say that. But understanding that there's more here than what meets the eye. And for all of you, I would love, even if you never study the communism or anything like this, but just words in general. I'm a big word person, so listening to the words people are using and how it affects what you think and what you say to people and what you feel about yourself is so, so important. That's all I got. And I didn't use a single slide because I did have slides, but clearly I did not